Okay, so I was had to stop last time, and we were talking about the history of the food industry. And where I left off is I had just finished up talking into further detail about Escoffier and his accomplishments and everything that had brought into the changing outlooks of the food industry. I mentioned that I was going to be jumping right into modern technology and those changes that had made in order to help progressively change the way that food was produced and product was placed out there for the masses. So that's where we're going to kick off today. To get started, again, we're going into the development of new equipment and new ways of cooking. One of the things that I always like to start with is talking about the ice box. It's one of my favorite stories. I really love talking about it because it's really fascinating in my opinion. Hopefully you think so too. For the ice box, so a lot of people don't know this, but the first initial ice box was actually established in China during Ming Dynasty, and it was done for the empress. The box was created as beautifully ornate carved wood box, and they lined the inside of it with silver and thinly hammered out silver all along the middle inside of this box. They would then fill the box up with crushed or chopped up ice and have a tray that would then be placed on top of it, and it would be segmented and broken up into portion sections, and it would also be done and lined in silver. Then they would take the chilled fruits, the fruits that they had cut or chopped or whatever they've done with, and then place them into those compartments, and it would keep them cold and chilled. One of the most favorite components that the empress loved during that time was peeled, chilled grapes. I don't know if you've ever peeled a grape, but I feel very sorry for that palace kitchen staff that had to sit there and do that for every little whim of that empress that she wanted those, because talk about tedious. Wow. But by doing that, she would have it sent from the kitchens to her palace pretty often, at least once a day from what I had read. And from my understanding, it was quite a trek to go from where the palace kitchens were located to haul that and carry it to her location every single time. And it was very popular component. And during the exact same time, we had just started to, as a whole, meaning the western side of the world, at this time it was England, they were trying to build a better relationship with China and start a better trade system. They were offering to sell weaponry, rifles primarily, to China in trade of better silks and things of that nature, silkworms, in order to make their own silks, and how they would do it. All of this stuff was in the works while that embassy, that ambassador, was visiting. He happened to have dined with the queen at a luncheon where she had had this ice box presented and displayed for them. And when that happened, he asked, I would love to take one of these if you would allow it to my king and queen and show it to them. They would really love it. And they did. It was brought back as a gift to the king and queen of England, and during that time they wanted to find a way to change that or improve upon it and elaborate on it, and that's how our ice boxes started to go into production. The ice box of our modern era for the early 1900s was a wooden box with a door latch, and it would be lined with aluminum. We had a lot of aluminum left over after the First World War, so that was able to be used on the inside of these ice boxes. And what they would do is they'd pull this drawer out, drop the ice in, push it back under, and it would chill the box up for the day until the next morning. It would come rolling around, and that iceman would come around and drop that ice right back into it. Fascinating stuff. I love that. That's just one very simple change that just started to revolutionize the whole concept of how we prepared and stored our foods. The easy control of heat started to change. The way we used our ovens, our heating elements started to transition into a much more modern, sophisticated way of doing it instead of always just fire and wood. Equipment started to modernize and motorize. We got to a place where we started to have motorized cutters, mixers with a handle that would turn a crank and it would spin the mixers. Those things might seem simple, but they helped to greatly simplify the work during that time and started to push us into a much more modern way of cooking. Sophisticated cooling, freezing, heating equipment started to come into volition. Some foods can even be prepared in much more further advancement and in much more larger quantities because of this, and be stored or saved until they were ready to be cooked or placed into service. These changes were unheard of 40 and 50 years from that time frame that we were in the early 1900s. Some large multi-unit chains preparing foods for central commission or to be distributed into individual stores. I mean, these things were unheard of at a time long ago, and now they're just commonplace to us. Cooling and freezing of food at their peak of freshness, and then freeze drying it in order to bag it and then place it into a supermarket, completely unheard of at the time. And now it is something we take for granted. Modern refrigeration, like I stated, started to make changes, and we started to rapidly progress in transportation. This started to cause a revolutionary change in our eating habits and what we wanted. More exotic delicacies can now be shipped from all around the world and arrive fresh and in peak condition. That was never something that I would have thought would have been a thing, but it is. It very much is. Now you can even have butchers butcher up fresh meat for you and ship it directly to your door at home. Crazy. It's just crazy, but it's fascinating, and it just makes me get excited about where we're going to go to next from here. Freezing, canning, freeze drying, vacuum packing, all of these changes really started to progress us to where we were able to make food more affordable. We were able to get our hands on rare or expensive items and make it more accessible to the public. This is revolutionary, whether you believe it or not. It very much is. Techniques were starting to change in food production. We were able to rapidly prepare food in a completely different process than we originally did. We were able to make it in one location and then have it sent to another location, something that wasn't a possibility for a very long time. We could start to outsource and actually create more convenience foods. If your restaurant wanted to have bread but didn't have the space or the inclination to make your own breads or dinner rolls, you could now outsource that from a bakery and have it then delivered to you in dough form, where all you had to do is pop it in the oven and you have fresh baked bread for your establishment. Changed the whole way we thought about the restaurant industry and how we were doing things. Then the awareness on food safety and nutritional awareness became more rapidly focused upon. When the development of sciences in microbiology and the first microscope started to come into play, we started to get a really better idea of what germs and bacteria were. Also, what nutrition was doing to the body and what not having enough protein could do to a human body. We started to really get to the nitty-gritty science of it. This impacted the food service as a whole. Hundreds of years ago, little was known about sanitation or nutrition, but now nutrition and safety are so important and huge aspects to cooking that we have to train you on that now. Today's customers are so knowledgeable about nutrition and what is needed for them to be healthy, and the demand for healthier, more well-balanced menus became necessary for a restaurant to be lucrative and successful. Awareness of food allergies and intolerances became necessary for chefs to be able to have that knowledge to assist customers and not turn people away because of a deficiency was necessary for growth on a chef's level. So by doing this, we had to then change the way we thought on food. We had to focus on nutritious, low fat, low calorie meals. We had to adapt to the customer so that we would be able to eliminate certain foods from their diet, such as your glutens, your soy, dairy and egg items, if necessary, in order for them to be able to have the best dining experience possible. We were getting to a place where we were urging for more simplified menus, more eliminating the complexity and the ornamentation that was such a huge emphasis for so long, and really focusing on plain, natural tastes. Basic, fresh ingredients became more of a focal point. The urge to be more inventive, to highlight and be creative. This aspect of more fancier, complicated presentations and procedures started to have a much higher demand. And this meant that we had to both focus and on the healthy aspect of it,